They called it the Silent Victory. Across 17 star systems, the hegemony's forces had swept through human colonies like a cosmic wildfire, leaving nothing but scorched worlds and memorial beacons in their wake. The galaxy's most feared military alliance had finally done what they promised for decades. They had ended the human threat once and for all. Or so they thought. What the hegemony didn't understand was that humans had never been truly defeated before. They had been pushed back, overwhelmed, scattered to the winds, but never broken. And in the depths of space, in hidden bunkers beneath dead worlds, in the hearts of survivors who refused to kneel, something far more dangerous than any fleet or weapon was being born. The will to prove that humanity's greatest victories had always come from their darkest hours. The aliens thought they had won the war. They were about to discover they had only awakened something that should have remained sleeping. Something that would teach the galaxy why humans had earned their reputation not through conquest, but through an unbreakable refusal to accept defeat. This is the story of how the hunted became the hunters, and how the galaxy learned that declaring victory over humanity was the first step toward your own extinction. The emergency bunker beneath New Geneva had been silent for 47 days. Commander Sarah Chen counted each one like prayer beads, marking time in a world that no longer seemed to have any. The reinforced walls, designed to withstand direct orbital bombardment, had kept them alive when the hegemony forces turned the surface into molten glass. But survival and living were two very different things. She watched the faces around her in the dim blue light of the emergency systems. 53 souls, all that remained of a colony that once housed 3 million humans. Engineers, doctors, farmers, children who barely understood why they couldn't go outside anymore. Each face told the same story. They had lost everything, but somehow they were still breathing. The hegemony had been thorough. Commander Vexter himself had overseen the bombardment of New Geneva, broadcasting his victory across 17 star systems. The broadcasts had been intercepted by their buried communication array, and Chen had forced herself to watch every horrifying minute. The elegant Veiltheron had stood on the bridge of his flagship, his crystalline features reflecting the dying light of human worlds, declaring the end of what he called the human plague. "Ma'am," whispered Lieutenant Torres, the youngest member of their group at barely 22. "The surface scanners are picking up movement again." Chen moved to the monitoring station, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. The surface of New Geneva was a wasteland of twisted metal and radioactive craters, but life had a way of surviving even in hell. Small groups of scavenger drones combed through the ruins, probably searching for any signs of human technology or survivors. The hegemony wanted to be absolutely certain they had eliminated every trace of human presence. "Still running the same search patterns," Chen observed, studying the heat signatures on the display. "They're being methodical, thorough." Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the colony's chief xenobiologist, joined them at the console. Her graying hair had turned completely white in the weeks since the attack, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "They're scared," she said quietly. Scared, Torres looked confused. "They just wiped out 17 human colonies. They control half the galaxy. What do they have to be scared of?" Dr. Hawthorne smiled grimly. "Us. They're scared of us. Think about it, why would you need to be so thorough in destroying your enemy unless you knew they had a history of coming back from impossible situations?" Chen felt something stir in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt since the bombardment began. Hope was a dangerous thing in their situation, but it was also the most human thing of all. "Tell me more, Doctor." "I've been analyzing the hegemony's tactical reports from their previous campaigns," Hawthorne continued, pulling up files on her tablet. "They've conquered dozens of species over the past 1,000 years, but none of those campaigns lasted more than a few months, and none required the complete destruction of inhabited worlds. With us, they've been fighting for almost a decade, and they still felt the need to glass our planets rather than simply occupying them." The bunker fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Chen could see understanding dawning on several faces around her. The hegemony hadn't attacked human colonies out of expansion or resource needs. They had attacked out of fear. "The Hegemony Council met in emergency session 3 times during our war," Hawthorne continued. "That's unprecedented. I managed to intercept fragments of their communications through diplomatic channels before the final assault. They called humans dangerously adaptive and unpredictably resilient. One Veiltheron commander even suggested that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist." "But we lost," Torres said, his voice heavy with confusion and grief. They destroyed everything, our fleets, our colonies, our military installations, Chen interrupted, understanding flooding through her. They destroyed our military capacity, but they couldn't destroy what makes us human. She turned to address the entire group, her voice carrying the authority that had kept them together through 7 weeks of hell. The hegemony made a critical error. They assumed that human strength came from our ships and weapons. But human strength has never come from our technology. It comes from our refusal to accept defeat. Marcus Webb, a former fleet engineer who had been working on experimental technologies before the attack, stepped forward. His hands were stained with grease and burns from improvised repairs, but his eyes held a light that Chen recognized. "Commander, I've been working on something down in the lower levels, something the hegemony might not expect." Chen nodded for him to continue. "Before the attack, I was part of a classified project developing quantum disruption technology. Nothing we could weaponize on a large scale, but—" He paused, looking around the group. "The hegemony's ships rely on quantum field generators for their shields and faster-than-light travel. If we could disrupt those fields—" "You're talking about sabotage?" Chen said. "I'm talking about giving them a reason to remember why they were afraid of us in the first place," Webb replied. Dr. Hawthorne pulled up another file on her tablet. "Marcus might be onto something. The hegemony has established a supply depot in orbit around New Geneva. They're using it as a staging point for operations in this sector. If that depot were to suffer a catastrophic failure, it would cripple their ability to maintain control of this entire region," Chen finished. "But how do we reach orbit? Our shuttle was destroyed in the first wave of the attack." Webb's grin was the first genuine smile Chen had seen in weeks. "We don't need to reach orbit, Commander. The hegemony is coming to us." He pulled up the surface scanner display and pointed to a section of readings they had been ignoring. "Those aren't just scavenger drones. Look at the pattern. They're conducting geological surveys. The hegemony is planning to establish a permanent ground installation here, probably a mining operation to extract rare minerals from the crystallized surface layer their bombardment created. Which means they'll be bringing construction equipment, personnel, and most importantly, transport ships," Chen realized. The bunker buzzed with sudden energy as people began to understand what Webb was suggesting. It was audacious, dangerous, and probably suicidal. It was also exactly the kind of impossible plan that humans had a history of making work. "We'd need to coordinate perfectly," Chen said, her mind already working through the logistics. "We'd have one chance, maybe less, and even if we succeeded in reaching their depot, we'd be vastly outnumbered." "With respect, Commander," said Sergeant Martinez, the grizzled former colonial security chief, "we're already outnumbered. The entire human race is outnumbered right now. The question isn't whether we can win. The question is whether we can make them remember why they were afraid to fight us in the first place." Chen looked around the bunker at the faces of the 53 survivors. She saw fear, grief, and exhaustion. But underneath it all, she saw something that no amount of orbital bombardment could destroy. She saw the stubborn, irrational, beautiful human refusal to give up. "Dr. Hawthorne, I need you to compile everything we know about hegemony technology and military doctrine. Webb, show me exactly what you've been building. Martinez, inventory our weapons and equipment." Chen's voice carried the ring of command that had been dormant for too long. "Torres, begin monitoring hegemony communications. I want to know when they're planning to begin construction." "What are we really doing here, Commander?" asked Maria Santos, a young mother who had lost her husband in the bombardment. Chen met her eyes steadily. "We're about to remind the galaxy why the hegemony was afraid of humans, and we're going to start by proving that destroying our worlds doesn't mean they've destroyed us." Over the next several days, the bunker transformed from a tomb into a workshop. Webb's quantum disruption device turned out to be more sophisticated than anyone had expected. Using salvaged components and materials that should never have worked together, he had built something that could theoretically disrupt hegemony technology on a massive scale. The device was crude, unstable, and absolutely perfect for their needs. Dr. Hawthorne's research revealed critical weaknesses in hegemony military doctrine. Their entire strategic philosophy was built around overwhelming technological superiority and the assumption that defeated enemies would surrender. They had no experience dealing with guerrilla warfare or asymmetric tactics because no species had ever been desperate enough to try them. They're used to fighting formal wars against organized governments, Hawthorne explained during one of their planning sessions. They expect their enemies to have command structures, supply lines, and strategic objectives. They've never faced an enemy with nothing left to lose. The Hegemony construction fleet arrived on day 51. 3 massive construction vessels, escorted by a destroyer and 2 cruisers, took up position in orbit around New Geneva. Chen watched their deployment through the surface scanners, noting that they maintained the standard hegemony formation for occupation operations. They're following the textbook, Martinez observed. Perimeter security, overlapping fields of fire, standard patrol routes. They're not expecting any resistance. Why would they? Torres asked. As far as they know, this planet is dead. Chen smiled grimly. Then we have our first advantage. They think we don't exist. The hegemony ground teams began their surveys 3 days later. Massive hover platforms descended from the construction ships, carrying teams of Veiltheran engineers and Krolok heavy construction specialists. They began establishing a temporary base camp approximately 10 kilometers from the bunker's hidden entrance. Chen watched them work with professional interest. The hegemony was efficient, organized, and completely predictable. They followed safety protocols that had been developed for 100 different worlds and 1,000 different construction projects. But none of those protocols accounted for desperate humans with improvised weapons and nothing left to lose. Webb, how long do you need to finish the device? Chen asked. Another week, maybe less if I push it, he replied. But Commander, I have to warn you, this isn't a precision instrument. When this thing goes off, it's going to disrupt every quantum field in a 50-kilometer radius. That includes our own equipment. Good, Chen said. We want them to know we're here. We want them to understand that the war isn't over. Dr. Hawthorne looked up from her latest analysis of hegemony communications. Commander, I'm picking up increased traffic between the construction fleet and hegemony command. It looks like they're accelerating their timeline for some reason. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Show me. The intercepted messages were fragmentary and heavily encrypted, but Hawthorne had managed to decode enough to reveal a disturbing pattern. The hegemony wasn't just establishing a mining operation on New Geneva. They were preparing it as a monument to their victory over humanity. They're planning to broadcast a galaxy-wide celebration, Hawthorne said quietly. A ceremony to mark the complete elimination of human resistance. They want every species in the galaxy to witness what happens to those who oppose the hegemony. The bunker fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony intended to use New Geneva as a symbol, a warning to every other species that might consider resisting their expansion. In their minds, the human problem was solved, and they wanted the galaxy to know it. When? Chen asked. 10 days. They're bringing in delegations from every major species in the galaxy. The ceremony will be held on the site where New Geneva's capital used to stand. Chen looked around at her people, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. The hegemony wanted to use their world as a symbol of human defeat. Instead, they were about to make it a symbol of human defiance. Webb, forget about taking another week. We move in 5 days, whether the device is ready or not. Chen's voice carried the weight of final decision. If the hegemony wants to throw a celebration on our world, we're going to give them a party they'll never forget. She stood and addressed the entire group, her words carrying across the bunker like a prayer and a promise. 53 people, that's all we are. 53 people against an empire that spans half the galaxy. By every rational measure, we should surrender. We should accept defeat and try to survive. But humans have never been rational, and we've never known how to stay defeated. She paused, looking into each face. In 5 days, we're going to prove to the galaxy that declaring victory over humanity is premature. We're going to show them that as long as one human draws breath, the war continues. And we're going to make sure that every species in the galaxy understands that we are not finished. The silence that followed was different from the oppressive quiet that had filled the bunker for nearly 2 months. This was the silence of people who had found their purpose again, who had remembered what it meant to be human in the face of impossible odds. Outside, hegemony forces continued their work, building their monument to human defeat. They had no idea that beneath their feet, humanity was preparing its response. The galaxy was about to remember why it had learned to fear the small, stubborn species, from the third planet of an unremarkable star system. And the hegemony was about to discover that the hardest enemy to defeat is one who refuses to believe the fight is over. Webb's quantum disruption device looked like something a mad scientist might have assembled in a fever dream. Cables and components salvaged from the bunker systems were jury-rigged together with materials that had never been designed to work in combination. The central core was built around a medical scanner's quantum resonance chamber, surrounded by power cells from their emergency lighting, and wrapped in what appeared to be repurposed kitchen appliances. "Are you absolutely certain this will work?" Dr. Hawthorne asked, eyeing the device with scientific skepticism. Webb wiped grease from his hands and grinned. "Will it disrupt hegemony quantum fields? Absolutely. Will it do it safely? Well, that's where things get interesting." Commander Chen studied the contraption that represented their only hope of striking back at the hegemony. It was ugly, improvised, and completely insane. In other words, it was perfectly human. "Define interesting," Webb. "The quantum cascade effect will propagate through any connected quantum field network," Webb explained, pointing to various components. "Hegemony ships use quantum field generators for everything: shields, weapons, life support, communications. When this baby goes off, it'll spread through their entire fleet like a virus through a computer network." "And the downside?" Chen prompted. "Well, there's a slight chance the cascade effect might be permanent. And there's also a possibility that the initial detonation will create a localized space-time distortion. Nothing major, just a small tear in the fabric of reality." Sergeant Martinez looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Kid, when you say small tear in reality, exactly how small are we talking?" "Probably no more than a few kilometers in diameter," Webb replied cheerfully. The bunker fell silent as everyone processed this information. "Webb," Chen said carefully, "are you telling me that our secret weapon might accidentally destroy the planet?" "Not destroy, Commander, more like relocate it to a slightly different dimensional phase, temporarily." Torres laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "So we're going to save humanity by possibly erasing our own planet from existence." "Hey, if we're going down anyway, we might as well take them with us," Martinez said pragmatically. "Besides, has anyone got a better plan?" Dr. Hawthorne pulled up her tactical analysis on the bunker's main display. "Actually, the risk might be worth it. I've been studying the hegemony fleet composition, and if Webb's device works as intended, we could disable their entire orbital force." The display showed the hegemony ships in perfect formation around New Geneva. 3 construction vessels, 1 destroyer, 2 cruisers, and a command ship that had arrived the previous day carrying diplomatic delegations from across the galaxy. It was an impressive show of force, designed to demonstrate hegemony power to their guests. "The command ship is the key," Hawthorne continued. "It's broadcasting the ceremony to every major world in the galaxy. If we can disrupt their transmission at the right moment, we turn their victory celebration into a demonstration of human resistance." Chen nodded, understanding the psychological warfare aspect of their mission. "How long will the quantum disruption last?" "Depends on how well they understand quantum field mechanics," Webb admitted. "Could be minutes, could be hours, maybe days if we're lucky. The beauty of this approach is that they've never encountered anything like it before. Their entire technological base assumes quantum field stability." Maria Santos, who had been quietly listening to the technical discussion, spoke up. "What about the people on those ships? The crews, the delegates?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Chen felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. They were talking about potentially killing thousands of beings, many of whom might be innocent civilians or diplomats. "The hegemony killed 3 million people on this planet alone," Martinez said quietly. "They've wiped out entire species. How many innocents died when they glassed our worlds?" "That doesn't make us like them," Santos replied. "We're supposed to be better than that." Chen looked at the faces around her, seeing the moral struggle that was at the heart of what it meant to be human. Even in their darkest hour, facing extinction as a species, they were debating the ethics of their actions. It was exactly this kind of thinking that had made the hegemony afraid of them in the first place. "Santos is right," Chen decided. "We're not trying to become monsters, we're trying to survive as humans. Webb, can you modify the device to disable their ships without causing casualties?" Webb scratched his head, considering the technical challenge. I can probably tune the quantum frequency to target their technology specifically. It'll be less effective, and it might give them time to adapt, but it won't kill anyone directly. Do it, Chen ordered. We're not the hegemony. We don't win by becoming worse than our enemies. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and planning. The bunker's inhabitants worked with the focused intensity of people who knew they had one chance to make a difference. Children helped sort components while adults debated tactics. Dr. Hawthorne analyzed hegemony communication patterns while Tors monitored their movements on the surface. The hegemony construction teams had made remarkable progress in establishing their ceremonial site. They had cleared a vast area where New Geneva's capital had once stood and erected a massive platform surrounded by holographic displays. The displays showed images from their campaign against humanity burning ships, conquered worlds, defeated human commanders surrendering to hegemony forces. They're really rubbing it in, Tors observed as they watched the hegemony crews making final preparations. Good, Chen replied. The more confident they are, the less likely they are to expect resistance. On the final day before the ceremony, alien delegations began arriving from across the galaxy. Chen watched shuttle after shuttle dock with the command ship, bringing representatives from dozens of species. Some were hegemony allies, others were neutral observers, and a few were clearly there under duress. Look at this, Dr. Hawthorne said, highlighting one particular shuttle. That's a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel. The Zephyrians have been fighting a border war with the hegemony for years. They're probably here to witness what happens to species that oppose the hegemony too effectively. Chen studied the alien ship designs through the scanner display. Each one represented a different world, a different species with their own hopes and fears. Tomorrow, they would all witness what the hegemony wanted them to see, the final proof that resistance was futile. Instead, they were going to see something else entirely. Web final status report, Chen called out. Device is ready, Commander. I've managed to tune it to target quantum field generators specifically. It should disable hegemony technology without causing direct casualties. He paused. Probably. Probably. Well, I've never tested anything like this before, but the theory is sound. Chen nodded. In her experience, human engineering had always worked best when it was improvised under impossible circumstances. Martinez, weapons status. We've got 47 functional weapons, mostly salvaged from colonial security. Enough ammunition for maybe one serious firefight. Not exactly what you'd call overwhelming firepower. It'll have to do. Hawthorne, what's the latest on hegemony communications? They're maintaining standard security protocols, but I've detected increased chatter about something they're calling the final proof. I think they're planning something more than just a ceremony. Chen felt that familiar chill of intuition that had kept her alive through years of military service. What kind of something? I'm not sure, but several high-ranking hegemony officials have arrived who weren't on the original guest list, including someone called the Grand Inquisitor. The title sent a ripple of unease through the bunker. The Grand Inquisitor was legendary throughout the galaxy as the hegemony's ultimate enforcer, responsible for the complete subjugation of dozens of species. Why would they need an Inquisitor for a ceremony? Tors asked. Because they're not just celebrating our defeat, Chen realized. They're planning to make an example of us. They probably have human prisoners. The possibility hit everyone like a physical blow. Somewhere on those ships above them, there might be human survivors being held for a public execution. The ceremony wasn't just about declaring victory over humanity. It was about demonstrating what happened to those who dared to resist. We have to move tonight, Chen decided. If there are human prisoners up there, we can't wait for the ceremony. Commander, we're not ready, Webb protested. I haven't finished the final calibrations on the device. If we rush this. If we wait, innocent people might die, Chen cut him off. How long do you need for minimum functionality? Webb looked at his improvised device, then at the faces around him. 2 hours, maybe 3, but Commander, I can't guarantee it'll work properly. Since when do humans worry about guarantees? Martinez asked. Half our history is built on impossible plans that shouldn't have worked. Chen made her decision. We move in 4 hours. Webb, do whatever you can to get that device ready. Everyone else prepare for insertion. We're going to crash their party. The next few hours passed in controlled chaos as 53 people prepared to take on an entire orbital fleet. Weapons were cleaned and checked. The quantum disruption device was carefully moved to their improvised launch point. Personal messages were recorded for loved ones who might never see them again. Dr. Hawthorne pulled Chen aside as they made final preparations. "Commander, I've been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns of Webb's device. If it works as designed, it's going to do more than just disable their ships." "What do you mean?" "Quantum fields are the basis for all faster-than-light communication and travel. If we disrupt the hegemony's quantum network, we'll effectively cut them off from the rest of their empire. They'll be stranded here, unable to call for help or retreat." Chen considered the implications. "That could work for us or against us. It means they can't escape, but it also means they can't retreat if things go badly." "There's something else," Hawthorne continued. "The quantum cascade will propagate through their communication network. Every hegemony ship and facility connected to their quantum grid will experience some level of disruption. We might be doing more than just striking back at this fleet. We could be affecting their entire military infrastructure." Chen stared at her chief scientist. "Are you telling me that our jury-rigged device could potentially cripple the entire hegemony war machine?" "I'm telling you that Webb might have built something that could change the course of the entire war," Hawthorne replied. "The question is whether we're ready for the consequences." Chen looked around the bunker at her people making final preparations. They were about to embark on a mission that could either save humanity or get them all killed in the attempt. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that humans had been making throughout their history. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, what are our chances of success?" Hawthorne smiled grimly. "Mathematically, virtually zero. But then again, mathematics has never been humanity's strong suit. We specialize in making impossible things happen through sheer stubborn determination." As night fell over the devastated surface of New Geneva, 53 humans prepared to remind the galaxy why their species had earned its reputation. They had no fleet, no orbital support, and no backup plan. What they had was something that no amount of hegemony technology could replicate: the human refusal to accept defeat. Webb made his final adjustments to the quantum disruption device while Chen reviewed their assault plan one last time. It was audacious, suicidal, and completely insane. It was also the most human thing they could possibly do. "Are you ready for this?" Chen asked her people. The answer came back in voices that had been tested by months of survival and tempered by the loss of everything they had ever loved. They were ready. Above them, the hegemony fleet maintained its standard orbital pattern, confident in their victory, and prepared to demonstrate the futility of resistance to the gathered delegates from across the galaxy. They had no idea that beneath the surface of the dead world they had created, humanity was preparing to prove that the war was far from over. The aliens thought they had won, but they were about to discover that humans had never learned how to lose properly. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented: the sight of a species that refused to stay defeated, no matter what the odds. And the hegemony was about to learn why they had been afraid of humans in the first place. The surface of New Geneva at midnight was a hellscape of twisted metal and crystallized earth, lit only by the faint glow of radiation decay and the running lights of hegemony vessels in orbit. Commander Chen led her team through the devastation with the careful precision of people who knew they had one chance to get everything right. Webb carried the quantum disruption device on his back, a 40-kilogram reminder of humanity's talent for improvising solutions that shouldn't work but somehow did. The device hummed softly with contained energy, its improvised components held together by military-grade tape and what Webb cheerfully called aggressive optimism. "Movement ahead," whispered Tors, who was on point with their best remaining night vision equipment. "Hegemony Patrol, 3 Veiltheran scouts with a Kralik Heavy." Chen signaled for the team to take cover behind a collapsed section of what had once been the Colonial Administration building. Through her scope, she could see the alien patrol moving with the casual confidence of soldiers who believed they owned the battlefield. The Veiltherans moved with fluid grace, their crystalline features reflecting the ambient light, while their Kralik companions stomped forward on massive legs that could crack concrete with each step. "Standard patrol pattern," Martinez observed quietly. "They're not expecting trouble." Chen watched the patrol pass, nodding their equipment and formation. The hegemony forces were well-armed and professionally trained, but they were following peacetime security protocols. They were here to provide a show of force for the ceremony, not to fight a war. That was about to change. The team moved through the ruins for 2 hours, working their way toward the ceremonial platform the hegemony had constructed. Chen had to admire their efficiency. In less than a week, they had cleared several square kilometers of debris and erected a structure that could accommodate thousands of beings. Holographic displays surrounded the platform, showing a continuous loop of human defeats and hegemony victories. There, Dr. Hawthorne pointed toward a section of the platform where additional security was concentrated. Those power readings suggest they're holding something important under heavy guard. Chen raised her scope and studied the area. The security was indeed heavier than anywhere else on the platform, with multiple layers of hegemony soldiers surrounding what appeared to be a containment facility. Through the transparent walls of the structure, she could make out humanoid figures. Prisoners, she confirmed grimly. How many? Tors activated his enhanced optics and scanned the facility. I count at least 30 humans in there, maybe more. They're being held in individual cells, probably for public display during the ceremony. Chen felt rage build in her chest like a physical force. The hegemony hadn't just defeated humanity. They had captured survivors for a public execution designed to break the spirit of any species that might consider resistance. It was exactly the kind of psychological warfare that the hegemony had perfected over centuries of conquest. Change of plans, Chen announced to her team. We're not just disrupting their ceremony, we're getting our people out of there. Commander, that's not what we planned for, Martinez protested. We don't have the equipment for a rescue operation. Then we improvise, Chen replied. Webb, can you modify the device to create a localized disruption, something that will take down their containment facility without affecting the entire fleet? Webb considered the technical challenge. I can probably isolate the quantum frequency and limit the field projection, but that means we'll only get one shot at the main target. If we use the device for a rescue, we won't be able to disable their ships. Understood. Hawthorne, what's the security layout around the containment facility? Dr. Hawthorne pulled up her tactical analysis on a handheld display. 15 guards in rotating shifts, automated defense systems, and quantum lock containment fields. The facility is designed to be escape-proof. Nothing's escape-proof when humans are involved, Chen said. We just need to be creative about our approach. Over the next hour, they developed a plan that was audacious even by human standards. They would split into 2 teams, one to rescue the prisoners using Webb's modified device, and another to infiltrate the ceremony and broadcast a message to the assembled galactic delegates. It wasn't perfect, and it definitely wasn't safe, but it was the kind of impossible plan that humans specialized in making work. Tors, you'll lead the rescue team, Chen assigned. Take Webb and 6 others, get to those prisoners and get them out. Martinez, you're with me. We're going to crash the main ceremony. What about extraction? Tors asked. We'll figure that out when we get there, Chen replied. Right now, the important thing is making sure the galaxy sees that humanity isn't finished. As dawn approached, the hegemony's ceremonial preparations reached a fever pitch. Alien delegations were shuttled down from the orbital fleet to take their positions on the observation platforms. Chen watched through her scope as beings from dozens of species gathered to witness what the hegemony promised would be the final chapter in human resistance. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at local noon, when the planet's primary star would be directly overhead. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The light of a new day would shine down on a galaxy finally free of the human threat. Chen and her assault team moved into position on the ceremonial platform's outer perimeter. The structure was massive, rising nearly 100 meters above the devastated surface, and surrounded by holographic displays that showed the greatest victories of the hegemony's campaign against humanity. Chen found herself staring at images of burning human ships and conquered colonies, including footage of New Geneva's final moments. Bastards, Martinez muttered, following her gaze. They're really enjoying this. Let them enjoy it while they can, Chen replied. They're about to get a reminder of why they were afraid of us in the first place. At exactly 11:30 local time, the ceremony began. Commander Vexter himself took the stage, his crystalline features gleaming in the harsh sunlight as he addressed the assembled delegates. His voice was amplified across the platform and broadcast to every major world in the galaxy through quantum communication links. "Esteemed delegates of the galactic community," Vexter began, his words carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Today marks the end of the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced. Today, we celebrate the final victory over the human plague that has infected our galaxy for too long." The assembled aliens responded with polite applause, though Chen noticed that many seemed uncomfortable with the rhetoric. Not everyone was happy about the hegemony's methods, even if they were afraid to oppose them openly. "For too long, humans have defied the natural order of the galaxy," Vexter continued. "They have refused to accept their proper place in the cosmic hierarchy. They have fought when they should have surrendered, adapted when they should have been broken, and inspired others to resist when they should have served as an example of proper submission." Chen felt her team tense around her as they listened to the hegemony commander's words. This wasn't just a victory speech. It was an indictment of everything that made humanity human. "But no more," Vexter declared. "Today, we demonstrate to the galaxy what happens to those who refuse to accept hegemony authority. Today, we show the universe that no species, no matter how stubborn or resourceful, can stand against the inevitable tide of our expansion." At his signal, a group of hegemony soldiers escorted 30 human prisoners onto the platform. Chen's heart clenched as she recognized several faces: colonial administrators, ship captains, and ordinary civilians who had been captured during the final assault on human worlds. They had been kept alive specifically for this moment, to serve as the final punctuation mark on humanity's defeat. "These are the last free humans in the galaxy," Vexter announced to the crowd. "Their execution will mark the end of human resistance and the beginning of a new age of galactic order under hegemony rule." Chen raised her hand to signal the attack, but hesitated as she noticed something unexpected. Several of the alien delegates were clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. The Zephyrian ambassador actually stood and started to walk away from the ceremony, only to be blocked by hegemony guards. This wasn't just a victory celebration. It was a demonstration of hegemony power designed to intimidate the rest of the galaxy into submission. "That's our cue," Chen whispered into her communicator. "Tors, execute rescue now. Martinez, initiate broadcast infiltration." Across the ceremonial complex, Tors and his team activated Webb's modified quantum disruption device. The localized field pulse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediately apparent as the containment facility's security systems began to fail. Quantum locks deactivated, automated defenses shut down, and emergency lighting flickered as the prison complex lost power. "What's happening?" Vexter demanded as his security forces scrambled to respond to the unexpected system failures. The answer came in the form of 30 freed human prisoners who poured out of their disabled cells and immediately began fighting their hegemony captors with improvised weapons and the desperate fury of people who had nothing left to lose. The rescue team had provided them with basic equipment, but mostly they relied on the human talent for turning anything into a weapon when survival was on the line. "Impossible," Vexter snarled. "All human resistance was eliminated. There are no survivors on this world." His words were interrupted as Chen and her team emerged from concealment and stormed the main broadcast platform. Martinez had successfully infiltrated the communication system, giving them access to the quantum transmitters that were broadcasting the ceremony across the galaxy. "Commander Vexter," Chen called out as her team took defensive positions around the platform. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the New Geneva Colonial Defense Force. I'm here to inform you that your intelligence was incorrect. Human resistance has not been eliminated." The hegemony forces on the platform responded with professional efficiency, but they were caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of armed humans in a place where no humans should have existed. Chen's team had the advantage of surprise and the desperate courage of people fighting for their species' survival. The firefight was brief but intense. Hegemony weapons were more advanced than anything the humans possessed, but human tactics were unlike anything the aliens had encountered. Chen's people moved with the fluid adaptability of a species that had learned to survive in impossible circumstances, using the platform's own structure as cover and turning the aliens' superior numbers against them by forcing them to fight in confined spaces. "This is impossible," Vexter repeated as his security forces struggled to contain the human assault. "We destroyed everything. We checked every possible hiding place." "You checked every logical hiding place," Chen corrected as she ducked behind cover from hegemony pulse fire. "But humans aren't logical, we're stubborn. There's a difference." Martinez signaled that he had gained control of the broadcast system. Chen moved to the communication platform, aware that her next words would be transmitted to every major world in the galaxy. The assembled alien delegates watched in shocked silence as a human commander took control of what was supposed to be her species' funeral. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen," she began, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network to billions of beings throughout the galaxy. "I represent the 53 human survivors of New Geneva, and I have a message for the hegemony and for every species watching this broadcast." Vexter was screaming orders at his forces, trying to regain control of the situation, but his troops were discovering that humans were remarkably difficult to kill when they had something to fight for. The rescued prisoners had joined the battle, and the platform had become a chaotic melee of desperate humans and confused hegemony soldiers. "The hegemony believes they have won," Chen continued, speaking directly to the galaxy. "They believe that destroying our worlds and killing our people has eliminated the human threat. They are wrong." A hegemony pulse blast barely missed her head, but Chen didn't flinch. She had a message to deliver, and nothing was going to stop her from saying what needed to be said. "Humans don't know how to stay defeated. We've never been good at accepting the inevitable. For 300 years, we've been exploring the galaxy, making friends with other species, and learning about the universe around us. What we've learned is that freedom is worth fighting for, that dignity is worth dying for, and that no empire, no matter how powerful, can destroy the human spirit." Dr. Hawthorne's voice crackled over the communicator. "Commander, I'm detecting massive quantum field fluctuations from the orbital fleet. Something's happening to their ships." Chen smiled grimly. "Webb's device is working better than expected. The quantum cascade is propagating through their entire fleet network." She turned back to the broadcast, knowing that her words were being heard across the galaxy. "To every species watching this, the hegemony wants you to believe that resistance is futile. They want you to think that submission is survival. But we're here to tell you that being free is better than being safe, and that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." The battle around her was reaching its crescendo as more hegemony reinforcements arrived, but Chen's message was almost complete. She had one more thing to say, and it was the most important part of her speech. "Humans may be the smallest species in the galaxy. We may not have the most advanced technology or the largest fleets, but we have something that no amount of firepower can destroy. We have hope. And as long as one human draws breath, that hope will survive." She paused, looking directly into the broadcast cameras. "The war isn't over, it's just beginning." At that moment, Webb's quantum disruption device reached full cascade potential. Every hegemony ship in orbit suddenly lost power as their quantum field generators failed catastrophically. The massive vessels began to drift helplessly, their crews scrambling to restore power to critical systems. The effect propagated beyond the local fleet. Throughout the galaxy, every hegemony facility connected to the quantum communication network experienced varying degrees of system failure. It wasn't enough to cripple their entire empire, but it was enough to send a message that human resistance was far from finished. Chen cut the broadcast and turned to face Vexter, who was staring at her with something approaching respect despite their hostile circumstances. "How?" he asked simply. "Because we're human," Chen replied, "and humans have never learned how to quit properly." The rescue operation had been more successful than anyone dared hope. All 30 prisoners had been freed, and Chen's assault team had successfully taken control of the ceremonial platform. But they were still vastly outnumbered and surrounded by hegemony forces that were rapidly organizing a counterattack. "Commander," Torres called out over the communicator, "we've got incoming transport ships from orbit. Looks like they're sending everything they can to retake the platform." Chen looked around at her people, the 53 survivors of New Geneva and the 30 freed prisoners who had joined their cause. 83 humans against an empire that spanned half the galaxy. By any reasonable measure, they should surrender and try to negotiate for their lives. But humans had never been reasonable. and Chen had no intention of starting now. "All teams prepare for final defensive action," she ordered. "We've delivered our message to the galaxy. Now we show them how humans fight when we have nothing left to lose." The orbital ships were descending through the atmosphere, bringing thousands of hegemony troops to retake the platform. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had hope. They had proven that the war wasn't over, that human spirit couldn't be broken by orbital bombardment or overwhelming force. The galaxy was watching, and they were about to witness something unprecedented, the sight of humans who refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. The hegemony thought they had won, but they were about to discover that declaring victory over humanity was only the beginning of the real fight. The hegemony dropships descended through New Geneva's atmosphere like metallic rain, their hulls gleaming in the harsh sunlight as they brought reinforcements to retake the ceremonial platform. Commander Chen watched their approach through her rifle scope, counting at least 40 vessels carrying what appeared to be an entire division of hegemony troops. "Well, that's not overwhelming at all," Martinez commented dryly as he checked his ammunition count for the third time in as many minutes. Chen smiled grimly. "Look at it this way, Sergeant. At least we'll go down fighting instead of hiding in a bunker waiting to die slowly." The quantum disruption had worked better than Webb had dared hope. The hegemony orbital fleet was still powerless, drifting helplessly above the planet as their crews worked frantically to restore quantum field functionality. But the dropships ran on conventional fusion reactors, making them immune to the cascade effect that had crippled their larger vessels. Dr. Hawthorne was monitoring galactic communications from their improvised command post, her equipment jury-rigged to intercept transmissions from across known space. What she was hearing was exactly what Chen had hoped for when she decided to broadcast their message to the galaxy. "Commander, you need to hear this," Hawthorne called out excitedly. "I'm picking up transmissions from Zephyrian space. Their military is mobilizing." Chen moved to the communications station, keeping low to avoid sniper fire from hegemony forces that were establishing perimeter positions around the platform. "What kind of mobilization?" "Full fleet deployment. And they're not alone. I'm detecting similar activity from the Altarian Federation, the Free Worlds Alliance, and at least 6 other major powers. It looks like our little demonstration has convinced them that the hegemony isn't as invincible as everyone thought." Torres looked up from his position at the platform's edge, where he was directing defensive preparations. "You mean our suicide mission actually worked?" "It's working better than we expected," Hawthorne confirmed. "The quantum cascade didn't just affect local hegemony forces. It propagated through their entire communication network and disrupted quantum field generators across 17 star systems. They've lost contact with almost a quarter of their fleet." Chen felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just the desperate hope of survival, but the broader hope that humanity's sacrifice might actually mean something. Their message had reached the galaxy, and the galaxy was responding. "Ma'am," Webb called out from where he was working frantically on another improvised device. "I've been analyzing the quantum field disruptions, and I think I can amplify the effect. If I can jury-rig another cascade generator, we might be able to extend the disruption field indefinitely." "How long do you need?" Chen asked as pulse blasts from hegemony weapons began to intensify around their position. 20 minutes, maybe 30, but I'll need to stay here to maintain the field manually. It's not exactly a fire-and-forget system." Chen understood what he was really saying. Someone would have to stay behind to operate the device, which meant someone wouldn't be leaving New Geneva alive. It was exactly the kind of sacrifice that humans had been making throughout their history, and exactly the kind of decision that made the hegemony afraid of them. "Do it," she ordered. The first wave of hegemony ground forces reached the platform perimeter just as the rescued prisoners finished arming themselves with captured weapons. Chen watched with professional admiration as 30 civilians who had been in prison cells less than an hour ago transformed into a coherent fighting force. It was a uniquely human trait, the ability to adapt and overcome in impossible circumstances. Commander Vexter led the assault personally, his crystalline features twisted with rage as he coordinated the attack on the human positions. Chen could see him through her scope, directing his forces with the precision of a career military officer who had never lost a battle before today. "Surrender now and your deaths will be quick," Vexter's voice echoed across the platform through amplified speakers. Continue to resist, and you will suffer the same fate as your species. Chen grabbed the nearest communication device and responded on the same frequency. Commander Vexter, this is Commander Chen. I have a counteroffer. Withdraw your forces immediately, and we'll consider not making you look like complete idiots in front of the entire galaxy. The response was a concentrated pulse fire barrage that forced every human on the platform to take cover. Chen laughed despite the desperate circumstances. I guess that's a no. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. 83 humans armed with improvised and captured weapons faced off against several thousand hegemony troops, supported by heavy equipment and orbital fire support from the few ships that had managed to restore partial power. Under normal circumstances, it should have been a massacre. The hegemony forces had every advantage except one. They were fighting humans who had nothing left to lose. Maria Santos, the young mother who had questioned the ethics of their mission, proved to be a natural combat engineer. Using materials salvaged from the ceremonial platform, she improvised explosive devices that turned the hegemony's own infrastructure against them. Her booby traps channeled the alien forces into killing zones where human marksmanship could offset superior numbers. Dr. Hawthorne used her scientific knowledge to predict and counter hegemony tactical patterns. Her analysis of their command structure allowed the human defenders to target key officers and disrupt their coordination at critical moments. Even the children contributed, serving as messengers and ammunition carriers while staying below the line of direct fire. It was a total mobilization of human resources that the hegemony had never encountered before, an entire population fighting as one coordinated unit. Commander, I'm reading massive quantum field fluctuations throughout the sector, Torres reported from his position monitoring hegemony communications. Whatever Webb is doing, it's affecting ships light years away from here. Chen glanced over at Webb, who was completely absorbed in his work on the quantum cascade amplifier. His device had grown from a single improvised unit into a complex array of interconnected components that pulsed with barely contained energy. How's it coming, Webb? She called out during a brief lull in the fighting. Almost there, Commander. Just need to synchronize the quantum frequencies with the galactic communication grid. He looked up with a grin that was equal parts genius and madness. If this works, we're going to disrupt hegemony technology across half the galaxy. The implications were staggering. A single human engineer working with salvaged components in the middle of a desperate last stand was about to cripple an interstellar empire's technological infrastructure. It was the kind of impossible achievement that had made humans legendary throughout the galaxy. Vexter's voice crackled over the communication system again, but this time there was something different in his tone. Humans of New Geneva, I offer you one final opportunity to surrender. Yield now, and I guarantee the survival of your children. Chen exchanged glances with her team. The offer was almost certainly a lie, but the fact that Vexter was making it at all suggested that their resistance was having a greater impact than he was willing to admit. What do you think, people? Chen asked her defenders. Should we trust the word of someone who just spent the last hour trying to kill us? The response was a chorus of defiant laughter and several suggestions about what Vexter could do with his offer that weren't suitable for broadcast to a galactic audience. I think that's your answer, Commander, Chen replied over the open channel. The final assault began at sunset, as hegemony forces launched a coordinated attack from multiple directions, while their remaining ships provided orbital fire support. The humans responded with the fluid adaptability that had made them survivors, shifting positions and tactics as circumstances demanded. Webb completed his quantum cascade amplifier just as hegemony forces reached the platform's inner defenses. Commander, it's ready, but once I activate this, there's no turning it off. The quantum field disruption will be permanent and irreversible. Chen looked around at her people, seeing determination mixed with exhaustion on their faces. They had fought beyond human endurance and achieved something that military strategists would study for generations. But the cost was becoming clear. They weren't all going home. Will it work? She asked. Oh, it'll work. The cascade effect will propagate through every quantum-connected system in hegemony space. Their ships, their communications, their faster-than-light travel, all of it will be permanently disabled. Webb paused. But Commander, the energy requirements are enormous. The device will consume itself in the process, and anyone operating it manually. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Chen understood perfectly. I'll do it, Webb continued. This is my design, my responsibility. No, Chen replied firmly. You're the genius who figured out how to build this thing. The galaxy is going to need people like you in the war that's coming. I'll operate the device. Commander, with respect, you don't understand the technical requirements. Then teach me fast. Over the next 10 minutes, as hegemony forces fought their way closer to the quantum amplifier, Webb gave Chen a crash course in quantum field manipulation. It wasn't enough to make her an expert, but it was enough to make her dangerous. The activation sequence is simple, Webb explained. But once you start it, you can't stop it. The quantum cascade will build to critical mass over approximately 15 minutes, then propagate throughout the hegemony network all at once. And the operator will be at ground zero of a controlled quantum field collapse. It won't be painful. You'll probably just cease to exist on a molecular level. Chen nodded calmly. Sounds quick, at least. Dr. Hawthorne's voice cut through their technical discussion with urgency. Commander, I'm picking up new contacts on long-range scanners. Multiple fleets moving toward this system at maximum speed. Hegemony reinforcements? Chen asked. No, ma'am. These are ships from the Zephyrian Alliance, the Altarian Federation, and at least a dozen other independent powers. They're all converging on New Geneva. Chen felt her heart skip. The galaxy had heard their message, seen their resistance, and decided to act. Humanity's last stand had become the catalyst for a galaxy-wide rebellion against hegemony oppression. Estimated arrival time? Chen asked. 6 hours for the advance scouts, maybe 12 for the main fleets. Chen looked at the tactical situation around them. Hegemony forces had nearly reached their position, and her people had maybe 30 minutes of ammunition left. But the galaxy was coming to help, and all they had to do was survive long enough to see it. Torres, Martinez, Santos, take the others and fall back to the secondary defensive position, Chen ordered. Hold them as long as you can. What about you, Commander? Torres asked. I'm going to finish what Webb started. Chen moved to the quantum amplifier and began the activation sequence. Get our people to safety, that's an order. As her team reluctantly withdrew to defensive positions, Chen found herself alone with the device that would change the course of galactic history. The activation controls were surprisingly simple for something so powerful. Just a series of switches and a single large button marked with warnings in 17 different languages. Webb had been right about the energy requirements. As soon as Chen initiated the startup sequence, the device began drawing power from every available source on the platform. Emergency lighting dimmed, communication systems flickered, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. Commander Vexter himself led the final charge toward the quantum amplifier, apparently understanding what Chen was attempting to do. She could see the desperate fury in his crystalline features as he realized that his victory celebration was about to become his empire's greatest defeat. Stop this immediately, Vexter commanded as hegemony troops surrounded Chen's position. You have no idea what forces you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Chen replied calmly as the quantum field began building toward critical mass. I'm dealing with an empire that thinks it can break humanity by destroying our worlds and killing our people. You're about to learn why that was a mistake. Vexter raised his weapon, but hesitated. Killing Chen now might disrupt the cascade process, but it might also trigger an immediate and uncontrolled quantum field collapse that would destroy everything within 100 kilometers. This device will cripple faster-than-light travel throughout this entire sector of the galaxy, Vexter said desperately. You'll be trapping thousands of ships, stranding millions of beings, disrupting trade and communication for decades. Good, Chen replied. Maybe that will give everyone time to remember what freedom feels like. The quantum cascade reached critical mass exactly 15 minutes after Chen initiated the sequence. The effect was invisible to the naked eye, but every piece of hegemony technology on and around New Geneva suddenly went dead. Ships fell silent, weapons powered down, and communication systems cut out across 17 star systems. Chen felt the quantum field collapse beginning around her, reality itself becoming unstable as the cascade propagated outward at faster-than-light speeds. She had maybe 30 seconds before the field reached terminal instability. Just enough time for one final message. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the New Geneva Colonial Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies as the quantum field began to tear itself apart around her. "To every human listening to this transmission, and to every free being in the galaxy, the war isn't over. It's just beginning." The quantum cascade reached its peak and propagated throughout hegemony space in a single, devastating pulse that disabled quantum field technology across 1,000 star systems. Ships were stranded, communications were cut, and the most powerful empire in galactic history was suddenly reduced to individual worlds isolated from each other by the vast emptiness of space. When the Zephyrian fleet arrived 6 hours later, they found the hegemony forces on New Geneva completely defeated, and the platform where humanity had made its last stand transformed into something approaching a shrine. The quantum amplifier had been completely consumed in the cascade, leaving only a small crater and a memorial beacon that the survivors had improvised from salvaged components. The galaxy-wide rebellion that followed lasted 3 years and resulted in the complete collapse of hegemony authority. Dozens of species that had been subjugated for centuries rose up against their oppressors, inspired by the example of 83 humans who had refused to accept defeat. Commander Sarah Chen's final message was broadcast on every free world in the galaxy, becoming a rallying cry for resistance movements throughout known space. Her words were inscribed on monuments, taught to children, and remembered by every being who valued freedom over security. The hegemony had thought they won when they destroyed the human colonies. They had believed that overwhelming force could break the human spirit and serve as an example to the rest of the galaxy. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than any fleet or weapon. They had awakened hope. And once hope was loose in the galaxy, no empire could contain it. The aliens had thought they won, but they had only succeeded in proving that humanity's greatest victory would always be their refusal to accept defeat. In trying to destroy the human spirit, they had given it wings. And the galaxy would never be the same,